But I think what we've certainly seen in the region is we've seen this drive, originally started sort of from investors some years back, and I think kind of back in around 2015, 16, with the Japanese government pension fund, really sort of setting that scene for ESG expectations in the region, really created a wave of uptake by investors in the region that's really been escalating from that ESG integration very quickly into adding in that climate aspect to that. And then that's been very quickly followed by the regulatory environment and the policy side of things, coming up sort of very quickly. But I think, one thing we've seen in the region is sort of, this rapid escalation in policies, and this really sort of started with disclosure. Some of the earliest ESG requirements came from Asian stock exchanges. And now we're seeing sort of how the Asian economies are seeing this competitive advantage that this can bring. And now this climate risk reporting has been integrated into these voluntary expectations, which are now moving to very much a mandatory climate risk disclosure in markets like Singapore, Hong Kong and Japan. And you see sort of how the regulatory and policy environment has been supporting this. In Japan, a couple of years ago, the setup of the TCFD consortium on the climate risk reporting through the key agencies of the Financial Services Authority, the METI, the Ministry of Energy, Trade and Industry, and the Ministry of Environment, mobilising their issuers and users of corporate data against this climate risk disclosure, and really encouraging this sort of regional regulator and corporate competition on that side, and that's now coming through sort of even more so from other markets. But with investors, what we've seen sort of to the really interesting survey results that Nadine presented, we're seeing a support for investors through this proliferation of initiatives that are now available to them towards net zero and setting these commitments. And we're really seeing a lot greater granularity around, what is the very specific proportion of assets that are committing to net zero, and increasing that over time until you get to this net zero portfolio-wide approach ultimately. And they're applying this internally to their own portfolios, but of course they can't do this without the investee companies, and we're seeing obviously there as well through that engagement process with them. And some of these tools and frameworks, like on corporate engagement, we're seeing the Climate Action 100 Plus initiative really mobilise over 600 investors globally, with the world's heaviest emitters driving that change through corporate engagement. And we now have 2/3 of those companies at a global level who've made net zero commitments. And we have 14 of the 33 companies in Asia under that initiative, and there's more outside of that initiative that have made those net zero commitments and to 2050, which is great. But now the focus is very much on that 2030 goal, that near term in this critical decade. How are the companies' strategy and development, how are they transitioning in this decade? And then, getting to what is the capital allocation decisions, how are they being made to really test our investors, the corporates following through with these commitments, and then investors are starting to reflect this in their own portfolios as well.